Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Living an Awakened Life segment of the Awareness Podcast. Usually at this point, I say I'm your host, Susan Telford, but today we have a guest host, Amir Freimann. Welcome, Amir. I'm really happy that you're taking over the hosting from me today because at the end of Seeking conference, I heard your interview of our guest Anne Sweet, and I really wanted to invite you to do the hosting of the podcast today. So, welcome, Anne. Thank you very much for joining us on the podcast. And I'm really looking forward to your conversation with Amir, which is titled The Simplicity of Being. So I'm going to hand over to Amir and I'll rejoin the podcast towards the end to tell you about a masterclass that Anne and Amir will be delivering for us in April. So over to you, Amir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan, and hello, Anne. So let's dive right in, shall we? I want to ask you about your spiritual awakening, but actually I would rather start with what led to your spiritual awakening. So if you could tell me what did you do prior to your awakening that you feel was useful and helpful in reaching that transformation, and what did you do that you feel was unhelpful or maybe even worse?
Oh, we are diving in at the deep end. Well, I was on the path for many years, maybe, I don't know, 25 years or so. So within that, there's a lot of scope for things to have been helpful and for things not to have been so helpful. I do feel, though, that even the unhelpful things and even the traumatic things, perhaps, all go towards building a certain matrix within that supports one's eventual self-understanding or self-realization. So I don't really feel to frame it in that way of the good and the bad or the helpful and the unhelpful, because I feel that it all plays a part of maturation and education and understanding and experience. So my path was somewhat traumatic. I didn't choose my teachers particularly well, and I devoted many years of my life to my two main teachers, and they both turned out to be less than what they promoted themselves to be. But at the same time, as I said, there was the foundation being laid. And I think for me, that foundation was meditation. Even though I'm not a particularly good meditator and it's not a natural thing for me, meditation, even though I didn't really understand what it was for most of my seeking decades, it laid this deep place in me of just being, the simplicity of being, if you like. I mean, I interpret it through the personal lens of, oh, I feel peaceful, or I feel I had a great meditation, or I felt my consciousness expanding. So my interpretation of my meditation experiences was not accurate, but the actual experience itself became doorways to understanding who I am and what my true nature is. So those experiences of peace and simplicity and expansiveness and at-homeness in meditation eventually became recognized by me as my own self. So that was really the journey of going from having the experiences but not understanding them to having those experiences and finally coming to a place of understanding.
I'm very interested in what you started your response with, and I have a question about it. So you basically expressed a view that was, I see the matrix of the helpful, of what I called the helpful and the unhelpful things as in the end all coming together for something that we could say is helpful.
Yes.
Do you feel that is part of the perspective that one discovers upon awakening, like a review or a reinterpretation of one's path?
Yes, I think the victim mentality, which I very much embodied for a long time. Oh, my terrible teachers, and why did this happen, and why did that happen? Which is fair enough. We all suffer in life, and it's very natural to have those feelings. They're not particularly helpful, though. Sorry, what was your question again?
Well, if you think that this kind of shift in perspective from the victim perspective to the it's all for the best is
well,
part
I think I feel uncomfortable with those terms in awakening and enlightenment. I find them quite meaningless, but I don't know what else to use really. But when one comes to truly know oneself, it's almost as though you get a long range perspective. I think you hinted at it in the question, and you're not attached in the same way to that very personal sense of self, the historical sense of self. And so, and you also see that, those difficulties honed me in a certain way, and those traumas actually made me grow up. And finding the unreliable teachers made me eventually and finally, after decades, rely on myself and not look to others for answers or expect a teacher to enlighten me. Those experiences taught me that I have to assume responsibility for this work, for this transformation, if I want it. So you begin to see the value in hardship. It's never one's choice. It's never one's choice. But if everything goes smoothly all the time, we tend not to grow very much. We tend to take it easy in a sense and kick back and enjoy what's there. So those piquant moments or difficult times very much have their place. And I think as you were indicating or hinting at, in self-realization, you start to see how it all made sense, how it all fit together into a perfect story. And you needed all of those emphases, or whatever the word is, in order to create that foundation.
Yeah, and I think there is another interesting point that is coming up in what you say, which is that you can't force yourself into seeing things in this way before the shift happens, because then you will be trying to kind of comply or artificially adopt a perspective that is actually not yours. So it would be completely inauthentic, right?
But at the same time, in that you can have in the back of your mind, this will all work out. You can have it in the back of your mind, even if you may not believe it, but you at least that goes into the mechanism of the mind as okay, well, let's just keep that there, so that can be helpful.
I like that. I want to ask you, I read something on your website that I want to just read a short couple of sentences. So you wrote, in reference to awakening, all these qualities are already inherent within each of us. Enlightenment is not the adding of something new or other. It simply reveals the inherent qualities that have always been present. So back to you, and what qualities in pre-awakening Anne, how were those qualities present, and how were they expressed in how you were before your awakening?
Well, they were mostly hidden, like with all of us, or most of us. They were very much hidden. And I think, like I had glimpses either in meditation or sitting with a powerful teacher, and experience the Shakti or the transmission or whatever. So, there were these moments or hours or days, sometimes weeks, I guess, if I was lucky, where I would have the sense of finally coming home, and all the anxiety and angst and personalization and sense of constriction and limitation and the misery of the personal self, if you like, the struggle of the personal self, was suddenly absent. And so I felt like I finally arrived back in myself, but I could never sustain those experiences, were never sustained. And suddenly I was back, into this straitjacket of the personal self again.
Right. But were there any characteristics or qualities, now looking back, because that's just what we're doing at this point, is looking back at how you were before the shift happened. So would you say, oh, this was a precursor or a harbinger of what was to come later on?
I didn't really know what I was doing for 25 years, to be honest. So I think that's an intelligent question posed to someone who didn't really move in an intelligent way. I would like to have had more structure or more understanding during those years, but I didn't. I really stumbled and, fell from one thing to another, or one teacher or teaching to another. It took a long time to understand what this, at least to my understanding now, it took a long time to get there. Yeah.
Well, okay, let's try to be a bit more forgiving to pre-awakening and so was there any value to the whole journey, in the sense of, did you change or learn anything in those 25 years of seeking that kind of brought you to the shift different than how you were at the beginning of the journey?
Yes. And I think we talked a little bit about this before, that each experience, if you like, good, bad, indifferent, somehow goes to making up, the groundwork, or filling out the picture, so that this change is possible. So for sure, yeah.
And what would you say was the most, or some of the most significant changes that you see in you in those 25 years of seeking, that you feel were valuable or supported your shift?
I think the most important thing was sheer determination, not intelligence or clarity, but just this. And it wasn't actually even mine. It was really the self seeking the self, which I had no control over. So it was intention. It was the unstoppable forward movement, trying to reach a place that I knew nothing about, that my whole life seemed to be dedicated towards. So that was really the key thing, that I didn't ever waver. I didn't ever leave the path or feel, I often felt hopeless, but I battled on, because I really felt that there was something, I could see it in the teachers. I read, the great scriptures and so on. I knew there was another possibility for an individual. And I'd, as I said, had glimpses of it, but had never been able to embody that as myself. So that drive and that intention, I think, was extremely powerful.
Wow. And what happened? So your awakening, or whatever you call the shift of perspective, happened some 20 years ago now, almost. So what happened to that drive or determination when the shift occurred?
Well, that was one of the most surprising things, because my complete identity was as a seeker. That's how I saw life, how I lived life, and I was already thinking about my next teacher. And, I was already, in motion, having left my previous teacher. So that identity was very hardwired into me. And quite soon after, maybe a few months, maybe 3 months or so after this change perspective happened, there was something I couldn't put my finger on. And I suddenly realized what it was, is that the seeker had disappeared, that the seeker had literally vanished. And it was extremely unnerving. And I thought, oh, well, now I've fallen off the path. Now it's finally happened. I've fallen off the path. And, but I didn't want to get back on the path either. So I was in a kind of limbo land for a while. So that drive, the drive of the seeker, dissipated, completely dissipated. But the love of evolution and the love of learning about what all this is about has remained. So that's quite interesting, that the drive, this underlying drive that didn't care about anything else and was willing to sacrifice in order to, find something. But that went, but something, the love of this, I guess, what it is, it's a relationship of love for spirit or God or truth or consciousness or life, has only increased.
Very interesting. That's very interesting. And so along the same line of my previous question to you of what happened to you in your 25 years of seeking, what did you learn and how did you change? So in the 20 years since your awakening, and you say that the love, kind of the drive toward evolution, toward not seeking, but discovering more, maybe?
Yes.
Has continued. So how would you say, or has it changed something in you since that shift occurred? Are you a different person now than you were 20 years ago?
Yes.
In what ways?
When this change happened, I kept very quiet about it. I was a bit embarrassed about it because I just thought, well, how do you really talk about things like this? I'd left spiritual life and so on, and I didn't have a community or teacher. And I also didn't want it to create distance between me and others. I didn't want to be different or create separation somehow, which I thought that this kind of thing easily could, So I kept quiet about it. And I was very busy in my external life, with a new partner and a busy career and moving house and moving countries and all the rest of it. And also I didn't really understand what had happened. I thought I wasn't sure if this was just a normal stage of development and everyone has always been in this place and I'm just catching up. I didn't really know, and I didn't have anyone to ask. So I just lived the life of simplicity. I just lived this inner life that felt like home, felt like wholeness, that was a real resolution of all the struggle. And it was every day I was surprised to find it was still there. This space and limitlessness and a kind of clarity and just a natural joy was there every day. And every year, on the anniversary of this shift, I would go, my God, it's still here after a year, after 5 years, I never really trusted that it would stay because it had never stayed before. And then, 15 years, I'm going, okay, well, maybe it's going to, maybe it will stay this time. So, but it was all very internal, very personal and quite small. The world I'd created out of this was quite small, but beautiful. I mean, I had no more questions. I had no more angst in the old way and so on. And life still presented its challenges and difficulties, but I could handle them in a different way. But in the last couple of years, since I met you, in fact, and we started talking a great deal and you started interviewing me in depth and so on. And through the talking and the investigation that you directed me to make, it all, and then meeting teachers who I felt had gone further than me, and I started to write and to speak more in forums like this. And the more I did that, the more this thing opened up from a very personal experience to a kind of cosmic or universal. So it just kept moving out and including more and more and more, and becoming more outrageously, I'm saying now the word complex, but I don't mean it in the old way of complexity. I mean, it just started to include more of the wonder and beauty and unbelievable creativity that is life, and that is consciousness, and that is love. And so that's been the real difference, is that me living this very little personal happy life has suddenly blown open to where I barely recognize myself, in fact, because I'm an introvert and I'm an artist, and I kind of like being left alone, and I don't like speaking in public, and all of those things. And these are all the things that I'm, but it's this I call it an it, but it's me and it's us and it's all of it. This seems to be being directed not by me. I'm not the director of how all this works, and I used to be the director of how I lived and how I express myself. So that's the difference, I think. That the frame of the person, the Anne identity, you don't have it, and you don't have it in the same way. You don't have yourself in the same way. In fact, you don't really have yourself, I'd say, at all, even though one is very much a self and very much in life. And obviously I have a personality and likes and dislikes and all the rest of it. But the baggage that one has always carried of the past and the desires for the future and fears, that package, which is nothing but trouble, the package of the personal self, which is nothing but trouble. But the identity that goes with that, and then I was at school, and then I did this, and we cling to those things, we cling to those life experiences, and they add up and add up and add up, and then they kind of calcify into, I am this person, and everyone relates to you as that person, and there's not a lot of wriggle room in that. But underneath that, or behind that, there's this outrageous, limitless, peaceful, simple, beautiful self, which has always been there, which has never not been there in all of us. It's not just the natural state of me and you and everyone listening, and then beyond that, everyone. It's actually the nature of nature. It's what it's all made of, and we're an expression of that. So we have never gone anywhere. We can't go anywhere. This is who we are, but we're usually not aware of it.
I find it a bit difficult to speak now. Thank you. Well, how do you experience yourself? Because there must be some form of awareness of I.
Yes.
Which is, I understand, is completely different from what it used to be. But yes. What is it? Can you speak of it?
That's a really good question. And I often ask myself this, and I don't ever come up with anything satisfactory. And I listen to other people, and I don't find what they have to say very satisfactory either. But I will try. I'll try. So the one that I described, the personalized historical sort of story of oneself, you can forget. But what there is, I guess, and forgive me if this sounds egotistical, like you just have radiant presence. There's radiant presence. And that radiant presence is alive to everything going on. And it doesn't mean that, that I'm super aware or, super anything, really. It's just that you're meeting life as life is in its totality as your totality. So the whole thing is a totality. And that feels like a very big self. You know, it doesn't feel like a small self from the old days. It's like, yeah, it's a dynamic and creative and ever moving, ever new. I think the key word, I would say, there's an ever newness to my experience that isn't dependent on anything, that is always there and always new. So there's never boredom or dullness or flagging. The whole thing is monumentally, it's not even thrilling, because that makes it something also from the old personal self. Oh, this is thrilling and this is boring. It's not like that. It's meeting life with one's whole heart, but in the most natural way and in the most ordinary way, as if it's always meant to be like this. And you see that the personal narrative conditioned self is the aberration, and this is the norm. This is actually who we are. This is the simplicity of being, you know. So I would say that would be what it is. And then there's a little hat, like a little Anne hat from the old days, that, you know, I can't quite relate to, but I know that the hat is there still, you know, it's somewhere, it's there, but something different has taken over. The self with a capital S has taken over. And that's a fantastic thing. And that's everyone's birthright and everyone's inner nature, without question. That is without question.
Well, does that new self have unique characteristics that kind of are special to Anne and not to anybody else?
Some of the expression, like some of the writing and the speaking, is purely myself, is purely individual. Like you read anybody who has recognized themselves and they have a particular note or a particular individual quality. So that would be specific. But in terms of consciousness or love or the embrace, you know, the embrace of oneself by life and life by oneself, all that is universal. So, you know, peace, simplicity, clarity, boundlessness, all of those things are universal. You know, different people will express in different ways or have different levels of those things, some more obvious or more foreground than others, but they're the universal qualities of consciousness. It is just the nature of consciousness. What do they say? Love, bliss, consciousness. That's that's love, truth, bliss, consciousness. That's the nature. So it always comes through an individual, and the expression will always be very specific and unique to that individual. But the well that it's coming from is the universal well.
Right. Well, this connects to something that I read on your website, which you wrote. Where is it? You wrote, there are still challenges and obstacles, but they are experienced within a very big context, and that makes them easier to bear and understand. So can you speak a bit about the difficulties and challenges, how you experience them, and what's different in experiencing them now?
I mean, one of the things that's different is that when one discovers one's own nature, this simplicity of being that we've been talking about, life does become more simple. You're less prone to getting into trouble, simply because you can see more clearly and you can kind of pick a vibe more easily. You know, it simplifies your outer life as well. Things tend to line up much better. The people you're with, the things that you do, there's a sort of synchronicity where you kind of go, oh, everything's working beautifully, you know, which doesn't feel like one's doing, it feels like grace. So that's a very marvelous aspect, you know, and something to be very grateful for. And simultaneously at the same time, you know, on this plane of existence, the relative plane is nothing but change and challenge and instability, so all of those things still have to be dealt with. Life in the body is very challenging, and that doesn't stop. You still have to earn your living and take care of your health, and people close to you die and things go wrong, and all of that. So you're not in some sort of protected state where you've transcended earthly life. Not at all. You're very much in this life more than ever. But at the same time, because you're at home in yourself, when things go wrong, you don't jump on the catastrophizing mind train. You simply deal with what needs to be dealt with. So again, there's a simplicity to one's response to challenge. And because you're already at home and you're already grounded in the knowledge of the goodness of life, the inherent goodness and godliness, if you want, of life, you can see, oh, well, bad health happens, money troubles happen. What do we need to do to take care of this? Rather than, oh my God, I'm, whatever it is. And so all of it just becomes smoother. It's all just a smoothing out and a more intelligent way of moving through life, really. But it's not that one can claim that. It's just a natural outcome. It's not like I can go, oh, Anne, so great, you handle that emergent, none of it belongs to you. It's all a gift given as part of one's nature, one's true nature.
Well, there is a certain motive that kind of I see also in what you said in one of your answers, one of the things you said earlier about feeling directed, not by yourself, but by some other intelligence or whatever. And also when you just spoke about feeling like being received, being gifted. What is your sense or intuition or experience of the source of that direction and gift? What's bestowing that upon you, if you want, or how?
Well, the source is something very, 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 very good. There's no question about that. There's no question about that. And we're given a million hints in the physical world of that in every moment, in the majesty of life and children and the planets and all the different kinds of people and animals and the beauty of nature and the stars. This good source, good isn't the right word, but the source is magnificent in its expression and in its potential expression. So there's like, this isn't just like, oh, this is the best I can do kind of thing with the planets and the stars. It's like, that's just the beginning. I haven't even gotten started yet. I can roll out a lot more than this, And so one finds oneself a tiny, tiny expression of that incredibly creative and all-powerful, all-loving, magnificent. So one is just this tiny little leaf on a tree, but as radiant presence, as an expression of that source. As is everything, It's only us that miss it. We miss it. And it's such a shame because it's there, it's here, and it's available.
Right. And when you spoke earlier about feeling directed by it, how do you experience that direction? Is that something that's like pushing you in a certain direction or pulling you in a certain direction? Is there only one right path for you at this point, or do you have a choice?
Oh, if only. If only. No, the it or the soul is very bossy, actually, is extremely bossy. And so, I spend most of my life, protesting, not really, but there's quite a bit of protesting. But it's a bit like, there's a current and you can't fight the current. There's a current that's moving, who knows where, I don't know where. I don't have any information. I don't have any secret knowledge. I don't have anything. But I also am unable to hold out against the current. So that's what my experience is. Like in everything I'm saying to you and to everyone who's listening, nothing is prepared, or, there's like, I don't have control over that. This is an expression of everything we've been speaking about. And that's why I can speak so confidently, because it's not like Anne having to come up with some ideas about, or it's like, this is the speaking of that current, if you like. So I, again, can't take any credit or blame for for this expression. It is simply the expression that is given to me.
So I have one question, or maybe a couple of questions, then maybe we'll ask Susan to rejoin us, which is connected to what you just said, which is that you seem to care very much about the awakening of other people. Is that also part of the agenda of that which is driving you?
Yes. And I think that's the agenda, full stop. I think that's really the agenda, full stop, is the evolution of the whole of existence, of everything to reach higher and higher state. That's what, well, I don't know if that's true or not. I think there's cyclical patterns, that history goes round and round, but also, well, actually, I don't know if that's true. So I don't know.
So do you experience that drive to help or support or facilitate the awakening of others as something that is now kind of the main drive of your life?
It seems so. It seems so that's where the current is pushing. That's where the current is pushing. And I do feel that we are all supported in our lives, whether we're awake to that support or not. And I think we can take comfort in the fact that we're not alone in this universe or alone in this world, which so many of us feel, that we are incredibly supported, and that we are intrinsic to this whole creation and ongoing creativity, that we are an essential and intrinsic and loved and absolutely valued part of it all. So everything is being supported. Nature is supporting all the rest of nature, And I think when the current in me started to become more rapid or active, and when when this impulse to be of assistance, or this impulse to help, I guess is the best word, that is a natural expression. But that's a natural expression of the goodness of the source. The goodness of the source is to help its own creation. And so one becomes simply a foot soldier among many foot soldiers in that. Again, nothing special, and nothing that, whoa, I'm so good, I'm helping. It doesn't belong to one. It's simply an expression from that same source.
Well, do you feel that you sometimes struggle with that?
Yes.
Command?
Yes,
because
you
mentioned that you are naturally an introvert and that you're an artist. So do you have to make sacrifices for that?
Yes. I do find it often exhausting. I find it often burdensome. I shouldn't really say that, but I sometimes find it too much. Yes. But then there's a renewal. Then, there's, after some rest or what, there's a renewal, and then one's ready to go again. And so, yeah, you get drained, but you get refilled. And so that is, that seems to be the process. But I do struggle with it. And there's pressure somehow to be seen as a teacher, which I'm not. I'm a talker, but I'm not a teacher. And so there's all of that the personal, it's not the personal self from the old self, but it's one's natural characteristics. We have these inherent characteristics. So the natural characteristics are not made that way, but the current is insisting that it doesn't matter. So the current is basically saying, well, we don't care about your personal preferences. Yeah. But you're a tool now. You're a tool, and we have some use for you. And so, yeah, you have to figure out how to do that. You have to figure out.
Do you find that you are that there is a demand from you to change in certain ways in order to be a better tool?
I feel I need to learn more so that when I am speaking, I have more, not knowledge in that way, but understanding, because all this becomes increasingly subtle and more becomes revealed. And so the more I can learn and the more I can investigate and the more I can question myself, the clearer I can be in this role. So that's very, very important. And also never to claim anything. I think it's a big problem with some of the contemporary teachers, perhaps, that there's a claiming of this, whatever it is. And then you're lost. Then all sorts of trouble arises from that. So I think keeping the closest eye. What did Padmasambhava say? He said, though my vision is as wide, as the stars, I'm paraphrasing here, my attention to my conduct is as fine as a barley flower, and so I feel that is absolutely essential. I think that's probably what I give the most attention to, like, what am I up to? What am I up to? So that it's like having a very strict policeman. And I feel that that's incredibly important, to keep that line of real integrity and straightness, not again as some sort of, oh, I'm so special, I'm so good, but just to hold that, because things can go awry very easily. Radiant presence can be used and abused in all sorts of wrong ways, as we all know.
So it sounds like, tell me if I'm true to your experience, that there is the radiant presence and the directive that is not personal and is coming from the source. But then you have work to do, which has to do with aspects of your personality and different forces and impulses that come from, not necessarily from the source, but from the psychological self.
Exactly. Yeah, there are imprints, there are these deep imprints in the psychology, in the psyche, from the past and childhood and all the rest, maybe even beyond that, who knows. And they still have certain wheels in motion. They still have certain wheels in motion. And you fail to recognize that at your own and other people's peril. You have to know that there's a deeply fallible and sometimes unknowable or unconscious individual in the midst of radiant presence. You have to live with that dichotomy, and it keeps you humble, it keeps you on your knees, and it keeps you from an inflated sense of self and a misuse of radiant presence.
Well, thank you very much, Anne, for all this. Susan, would you like to rejoin us?
Thank you so much. I'm so glad, Anne, that the current that is driving you has led you to our place, to our offering in the world. So you and Amir will be joining us in April for 2 masterclasses under the title The Simplicity of Being. So would you like to say a little bit about those? There will be information in the show notes attached to this podcast, but can you give the audience a flavour of what they might expect if they come and join us in April?
Well, I have no idea how we will approach the subject now, Susan, because it will actually, as we've spoken during this last hour, it will be part of the current's expression at the time. But I feel that, and in fact, I don't really have a lot of words to describe it because we aren't actually in that place. So I'll be making something up. I can make something up. Well, the simplicity of being is really one's true nature and one's home. And I think that many people are lost trying to find some great, powerful experience that will transform them forever and be the answer to all their problems and questions, when actually we are already there. We're already at home. We're just too distracted by our daily lives, by our thoughts and feelings, by what we want and what we don't want, for the subtlety of the knowledge of that home to become available to us, to be seen, to be recognized. So I think what Amir and I would like to do, I'm speaking for you now, Amir, you might have different ideas, would be to bring everything back down to what does it mean, the simplicity of being, and letting go of our ideas about enlightenment and fancy experiences and all the rest of it. What are the characteristics or what are the movements for oneself to bring oneself home to the natural state, to who we truly are, as this actually perfect simplicity of being? So that would be my, I guess.
I'd like to add something, which is something I'm very interested in speaking with you about, which is the complexity that a lot of people experience. And I think there are two kinds of complexity for people who are spiritual seekers. So one is the psychological relational self and all the complexities, within oneself and in the relationship to others, which sometimes seem pretty overwhelming. And the other complexity has to do with what a lot of spiritual paths seem to offer, which is the complexity of the path itself. So all kinds of techniques and approaches and anyway, so that would be also interesting to look at why is that? Why are some or many of the spiritual paths so complex or emphasize complexity so much?
Yes. I wish we were starting now, because that's a really wonderful line of investigation. I think could be really helpful to a lot of people.
Yeah, yes, I think so, because often what I hear from our audience is, I've been on a path for many, many years. I've done all the things, and yet what I'm hearing you pointing to is not my direct experience, so I must be doing something wrong. So, and I think that speaks to the complexity often of the paths that are followed, and also the thought that it's somewhere other than here. It's something different to this. So, and in fact, the session title, your session 1 title, is From Complexity to Simplicity. So I'm looking forward to that exploration. And that one's on the 10th of April. And then on the 24th of April, the title is Hidden in Plain Sight.
Yeah.
So would you like to say something about that? I mean, obviously you've been speaking about that the whole time, but just a few words as we end.
Well, I think that is the hidden jewel in each of us. That is from the implanted by that, the source of goodness, or the good source, or what that is the jewel that we all carry, the hidden jewel that we all carry. And what I'd like to speak with Amir about, I'd like our discussion to be, how do we discover, how do we uncover that jewel that is our own self? So that would be my line of inquiry for that second session.
Linked to what I just said is often the thought that everyone else has the jewel, but I don't. So yes, I think that would be a really valuable.
Well, I think you're touching on a point that I'm very interested in, which is the utterly, this may sound contrary to what Anne spoke about earlier, but the utterly personal, intimate, more self than myself of that which we're speaking about. I don't know what to call it.
That's perfect, Amir, because it is the most intimate, and it is the most, it couldn't be more personal, not in a personalization sense, but in terms of the deepest and closest part of you. I think what really struck me when this self-knowing happened was I'd always known this. This has always been the deepest part of me. This has always been present. I just never paid attention. I never saw that this was the everything else changed, but this is the unchanging ground of myself. I think you phrased it perfectly. I would love to go into that with you. That was just wonderful what you brought.
So that gives you a flavour of what to expect in these masterclasses. And as well as Amir and Anne being in dialogue, there will also be an opportunity for you to ask questions and interact directly both with Amir and Anne. So all that really remains for me to say now is thank you so much for coming to the podcast to have this conversation. And I really look forward to being with you both again in those masterclasses in April. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Amir.